This episode, it's with Garrison Hayes.
We'd have all kinds of wide-ranging conversations. We might as well have had a podcast.
We like starting our episodes asking our guests to name an unapparent truth of parenting.
You don't really have control over your schedule anymore.
Fears of like, I don't know how to bathe a baby. You know, they're so slippery. Like, how do you do that?
We never got that bit of advice that, like, hey, by the way, it's going to be really isolating at times.
More men need to have conversations with each other about how to support their significant others.
Postpartum brain fog is real. I think sometimes that can be weaponized against moms and women.
You need to nurture your relationship just as much as your children. Have you already felt that impact in your work life?
You don't have the space to just free flow. You have exactly 37 minutes. What are you going to do with it?
One of the things that I think makes your work so powerful is how you tie the past to the present. And is there something that you've thought about how it's shaped how you think you're going to raise your child?
For my son, it's not only obviously to know his history and to be tapped in, but also to be compassionate and courageous.
Girl, let's not show them. These are upgrade, subscribe for free content.
Stop.
You need to upgrade the subscription in order to get that. Hi, everyone. Welcome to season 7 of the Unaparent podcast. We are showing off our new studio, which is amazing. Marina hand did it. Like literally hand painted this mural. Incredible. And everything else was also Marina. The shelf right now doesn't have things because virtual episodes don't really show that. But in our in-person episodes, it will all be decorated. We're obviously so excited. This is new this season. We're writing different quotes on here. A lot might be Harry Potter quotes because I might be a Potterhead. But today's, interestingly, is a Dumbledore quote. Wow, lo and behold. And it says, "We must all face the choice between what is right and what is easy."
Soon we must all face the choice between what is right and what is easy.
Yes, I try to live by that. Anyway, today's guest. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you guys to see this episode. It's with Garrison Hayes. I actually was able to meet him at an event I went to last year, and he was expecting at the time. He is now a father. Congrats. I've been following his content prior to that and, loved all of it. I'll read you his bio and then you can enjoy this episode. Garrison Hayes is an award-winning journalist and creator with more than 1.2 million followers across platforms, where he has built a powerful voice at the intersection of history, culture, and progress. His work has earned him an NAACP Image Award nomination, recognition as a 2025 Route 100 honoree, 2 Webby Awards for Best Creator, and 2 NABJ Salute to Excellence Awards. Known for his ability to connect present-day issues to the historical forces that shape them, Garrison brings depth and context to conversations that often go overlooked. Now, stepping into a new chapter as a first-time father, he is beginning to navigate what it means to carry the same sense of awareness, responsibility, and storytelling into parenthood. I hope you guys enjoy the episode.
Yeah. No pressure to include this because whatever, it's just a thought. But we named our son. We wanted him to have a unique name, a name that no one else in the family had, which is hard because I have a big family. My wife has a big family. So we wanted his first name to be unique. We wanted his middle names to kind of reflect his grandfathers, and so that's tied in. That's pretty easy. His first name is Benjamin. And it's not a name that I ever thought I would name my kid. It was never I'm going to name my kid Benjamin. But we fell in love with the name. It means something really powerful to us, and so we did it. But now I'm thinking about future kids, and I don't know, you know what I mean? My name is Garrison, my brother's name is Gavin, and so my younger brother. So we're both G's. I don't have another B name. I don't know what I don't know what we're gonna do about this. So
yeah,
I'm stuck.
It's one of those
I feel
things
very
that
stuck.
we don't think about until obviously we find out we're becoming parents, and you're like, oh my God, naming our kid. It's we take it for granted because it's my name's so and so, but I didn't even think of the process my parents went through to name me, right? And so then when I got pregnant my first time, the name just came to me before I knew whether it was going to be a girl or a boy. when I was around 8 or 10, I was reading a music book. I grew up playing the violin, and there was an exercise that I was playing, and the piece, it was like a short piece that I played, and it was named something made in Kalina. And I just remember thinking, what a beautiful name, and I never thought about that again until I got pregnant for the first time, and that name just like popped back into my head. And so I looked it up. I looked up if it had any meaning behind it, what the origins were. And I found that it both meant to love, and it was a flower. And so I fell in love with the fact that it had a meaning behind it as well. And then, progressively naming other children. It's like, well, we already had the floral theme. My husband loves the Puerto Rican hibiscus, the amapola flower. And he wanted to name our second child Amapola. And so ultimately he proved to himself to be an excellent dad and partner. So I was like, oh, well, you get to pick the second name. I was of the mind that I did all the hard work so I could name them. But then, kind of kidding, but in all seriousness, I was like, okay, we'll name, the second child Amapola. And then the boy came along, and we couldn't find something that we liked that was like a floral for a boy, and we landed on koa, which is a tree, but it also means strength and resilience.
Cool.
And his middle name, Amani, means peace. So
That's
I was
cool.
like, I
That's
like that.
very cool.
Yeah,
That's very
it's one
cool.
of those things that he was adamant, though. He didn't want to continue his own family names. He's from a line of Franciscos, and he was like, no, we're stopping that here.
Like
But
this is the final.
no. So the K's, we have Kalina and Koa, and I'm Katia. So, we have a K thing, but it wasn't necessarily intentional, and then Amapola is kind of the odd one out, but she's also the middle one. And so I'm like, whatever. It worked. It worked out how it
You
had
know,
to.
it works out, and I do feel like, like it's I have all this kind of like, I'm agonizing over it. We're not even expecting, but I'm just thinking about it so much.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it'll be fine. They're
Mhm.
their own people. They'll go live their own lives,
Mhm.
and it won't matter whether or not their name is like somehow alike or different from their
Mhm.
sibling's name. That stuff won't even really ultimately matter.
Yeah, I think we put more importance to it than it ends up being in the end. But so on that note, this might be one of those things that was unapparent to you, but we like starting our episodes asking our guests who are parents to name an unapparent truth of parenting. It's one that you didn't know until you experienced parenthood for the first time.
This is such a good question. I mean, for me, it's actually really hard to kind of nail down one thing. I actually feel like I knew so little compared to like what parenting actually is. And so there are all of these things that come to mind. I thought like schedules were a real thing, but in reality, you don't really have control over your schedule anymore. And a little baby, especially in the first few months, they don't care anything about your idea of a schedule and, and what time they should go down to sleep and what time they should eat or wake up. They do their own thing, and it really is a bit jarring, actually, in its own way. So that was not very clear to me. I think in many ways, I got to, be uncle to so many of my friends' kids, and they are amazing. But you don't realize that you typically kind of meet those kids a little bit older. Like the first few months, parents are like cloistered. Like parents are
Mhm.
just like in the bubble. And so you really don't meet the kid unless they're like a close family member for 4 or 5, sometimes 6 months with some of my friends. And so my idea of what like a little baby is actually like a 6-month old, or it was for so long. And then becoming a parent, you realize like, oh, I was really tardy to the party, and there was so much going on before I got here.
No, absolutely. There's so much that you don't know until you experience it, right? And that's I guess about everything. Like you don't know what you don't know until
Yep.
you have it to experience it. But parenthood is a whole other ball game when it comes to not knowing what you don't know, right? Like I came into it with kind of fears of like I don't know how to like bathe a baby. They're so slippery. Like how do you do that? Like some like simple things like that that you kind of don't realize that, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to put diapers on a baby. I didn't have the privilege of having bunch of nieces and nephews prior, right? So I really had very little experience with babies. And then I was one of the first of my close circle to become a mom. And that was just very isolating and, as you say, jarring because there's so much that you don't know. And I knew that there was so much that I didn't know, right? But then you live it and you're like, oh, there were many intangibles that I had no clue about, that it's really hard to explain until you experience it yourself. But yeah, so because you are a new dad, everything's kind of like fresh for you. I'd like to start at the beginning of this new journey for you, and what that transition of fatherhood has felt like so far. And was there a moment or moments that really hit you like, oh wow, I'm a dad now?
I mean, so much of what you just said actually really resonates, in that even like watching my wife kind of navigate being, first time mom and even though, in some respects we got started later, we're both in our kind of early mid 30s. And still, we have friends. A lot of her closest friends still don't have kids or don't plan to have kids. And so there is this kind of learning curve, and there's like this degree of isolation that I think is real. And like we really need to kind of like name that more often, because I don't think we talk about it enough. It's certainly not something that came up among all of the advice that we got coming into parenthood. We never got that bit of advice that like, hey, by the way, it's going to be really isolating at times, and you're going to feel like you're in like a real bubble. And part of that is because there's so much love in that bubble, and there's so much like care and so much newness that you're kind of learning, and it's like a group project. And I guess that kind of gets to the question that you're asking about, like what the transition has been like for me. It's been, I try not to like complain or or even focus on myself too much, because my wife is really taking on so much as a nursing mom. That's just a whole thing. That's an entire experience, and in some ways a burden, and like it's a real thing. And
right?
It's so consuming. And that's what I'm trying to say. It's not that we don't want, it's not that she doesn't want to do it or that she doesn't love, our son. It's just that this is actually taking something very, very physical. It's a very physical thing that takes a lot of energy. And so I'm watching her do that. And she's such a superstar for that. And I think for me, the transition has really been gaining new insight on how to be supportive of her through all of this. It's interesting, as like two functioning, kind of busy professional adults, we lived our lives very much together, but we also had our spheres of kind of individuality, which I'm sure you could probably relate to, where like I go off and do my thing, she goes off and does her thing as an attorney, and we come home and we're together in the mornings and on the weekends and in the evenings, and sometimes we work from home together, and we have a great life together. But really, the interdependence necessary to parent is just fundamentally different than when you aren't a parent. And so that's been a really big kind of transition into fatherhood for me, that fatherhood isn't just a like me and my son thing. My son gets the best of me when me and his mom are working in sync and we're working well. And so that kind of strange math has been very new for me, and kind of a learning curve in its own way. We were just traveling recently for a conference that I was invited to. And, this is like the most time I've spent away from my son and my wife. I'm leaving the room in the morning and I'm coming back in the evening, and we've been kind of locked in the house for months. And, I'm coming back, and I'm like watching, the reaction on my son's face when he sees me. And it's just like, whoa, like it is world shifting in its own way to like see this kid have such a, in this case, a big smile, big reaction. Like he hadn't seen me in 25 years. Is really, really heartwarming. At the same time, it's like, okay, let me jump in here and give mom a break, because she's been with him for a few hours and needs a little time. And so all of those things have been really interesting new things that I've learned as I've transitioned into fatherhood.
Everything you say, right? It takes me back to my early, months of first time motherhood. But what you say about how you see what your wife is experiencing, right? That's beautiful, and I think more men need to have conversations with each other about how to support their significant others, right?
Mm.
And I say that through personal experience. I was at a point where, I experienced postpartum depression after my first, right? So I was just in this like isolation bubble, right? Even though I had support, I had a supportive partner, I had parents around that, was a huge game changer having my mom's help and my dad. I had family and I had a partner, right? A lot of people don't even have that. Um,
Yeah.
and yet I felt so isolated, and it took me a little bit to be able to name that, that postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression. And even so, my inability to express my needs to my, husband, created this really big disconnect between us where he's thinking that he's supporting me. He's thinking he's doing what I need. And I don't know how to best express myself to him because all of the feelings were new. There's so much guilt attached to like feeling like, I'm exhausted. There's a learning curve with the breastfeeding, there's such a learning curve with everything. And I didn't see his life tangibly changing the way mine was. He could still go off and work, be the superstar he is. And I'm stuck at home, kind of like figuring this out. And that was like my perspective at the time. Looking back, I can see how invested he was, how much he wanted to be that support system for me. But just we were both kind of lost. We didn't know how. And once I started, therapy, and I was able to name my emotions and not feel ashamed of them, that's when I was able to actually say, oh, this is what I need. And now I can express it. And, more often than not, our partners are more than happy and willing and wanting to serve us in ways that we need, but sometimes they need us to kind of name it, right?
No, that
Yeah, so it was such a shift when I was able to kind of get to that place where I could express myself and not feel like silly, where I could be vulnerable and name my needs. Because up until then, it was like I didn't even know what I needed. I was just exhausted. I was experiencing all of these not only hormonal changes and physical changes and emotional changes. It was just our lives as women, as birthing mothers, as breastfeeding mothers, changes 180. And you as men, as fathers, your lives change too, but just not in the same ways, right?
not in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the same way. Yeah, I want to like give a little grace even, to what you're describing. Like, you're saying like kind of feeling maybe silly but there's actually so much on a kind of first time mom and especially like a nursing breastfeeding mom's mind. There's like so much. The kind of postpartum, as they describe it, like a brain fog is
Mm-hmm.
real. And I think sometimes that can be weaponized against like moms and women in a way that is terrible. But the truth is that, you don't, I kind of had one of these conversations with my wife where she was explaining to me all the things. And admittedly, she was kind of frustrated in the moment and she had every right to be. She was kind of explaining all the different things that she's thinking about and trying to plan for. And it's like, okay, he has to eat every 90 minutes basically at some points. And if he doesn't eat, say he's asleep, I've got a pump and like, and then there's work and then there's the house and then there's like just my own general desire to maybe watch a thing or to go do this other thing. And I've been stuck in the house and when he falls asleep, I'm nap trapped. And like there are all of these like things happening that if you fail to share exactly what you need in that moment, I think there should be a lot of grace for that because there's so much else going on that's constantly drawing on your attention. And in some ways, I think it's the fact of kind of socialization in America or maybe in the world over where men don't have to bear exactly the same burden. But at the same time, there's like a degree to which is like a biological thing as well, where like there are elements that we actually cannot physically do. And so all of that kind of comes to bear, I think, in the first few months of a child's life. And if you aren't having those conversations, you should be. But there's also a lot of grace if you aren't exactly aware of all the intricacies of exactly what you want to communicate. And speaking of communication, this is something you mentioned therapy. This is something that I've been kind of talking with my own therapist about, which is this idea of communicating exactly what you need, but more than just what you need, just communicating in general. Like, we don't talk enough about the fact that, like, being a new parent, the baby, you love this child so much. And like, they take up so much space in your brain and in your life that they are really all you're ever talking about, all you even really want to talk about. He sat up today. Did you hear him say that thing? He's screaming like at the top of his lungs for no apparent reason right now. Like that's kind of all you want to talk about. And what I've been working on is like, how do we kind of carve out a little space to talk about some of that internal world that it's still there, and maybe it's kind of buried by a bunch of thoughts of love and attention and care for this little one. But there's actually still a lot going on. You're still a full human being, and you still have a lot of things going on the inside that it helps to get on the outside. And maybe, in the case of my wife and I, we used to talk about these things all the time. We'd have all kinds of wide-ranging conversations. We might as well have had a podcast. Like, we were just always talking about something. And then suddenly, baby boy was born, and a lot of that shifted. And it shifted in ways that were unavoidable, in that, like, man, we just love this boy so much. We love this kid, and he is like our world. But that doesn't mean that the rest of you is gone. And I think it's just I just think it's important to say, you know what I mean? Like, you got to carve that space out and be able to talk about it all.
Relationally, it's so important to have time for you as partners, right? Because you both obviously brought this kid into existence, right? But not only that, the older they get, the more kind of you need to be on the same page about how to raise a kid and all of that. But separately from all of the parenting aspect, right? You as a couple, as individuals, but as partners, need to have that time together, right? To kind of just, my mom always told me also, like, you need to nurture your relationship just as much as your children. And it's hard to strike that balance, right? Because kids are all consuming, especially, as babies. And then the older they get, they have their classes, and they have, their extracurriculars and all of the things. So I feel like it gets harder in different ways. But when they're really, small, they really are constant. It's like a 24/7 job where you have to constantly be attentive, of them and to them. And so carving out that time as a couple is hard. And I know, and that's the only time I've ever been okay leaving my children, especially in early motherhood, with anyone, other than me, was to have a date night with my husband, right? That kind of, in my mind, was like the only moments where I felt I could justify leaving my children, even though it would stress me out. And oftentimes we would just bring them along, and it was just the same thing we would do at home at a restaurant with our child, So, but then, the older they get, the harder it is to have those one-on-one conversations, because they're very talkative. At least my oldest one is, and she wants to join every conversation, and she wants to kind of, she takes up a lot of space, which I love that about her, and I love that for her, and I love that she will go out into the world and take up space. However, however, as parents who need our own time also to have adult conversation, it can be really challenging to find that time, especially since, in our case, my husband travels so much for work. He's gone every other week during, baseball season. And so it's even more challenging, because I love to see him being a dad. I love how the kids and he have that just super sweet relationship where they're excited that he's home, and I want him to be able to dedicate that time to them. And also, I'm an individual, I'm a human with needs as well, and I would like to have that one-on-one with him when we can, but it's such limited time. And I will say, in your case and your wife, you both had careers that you thrived in, it sounds like, prior to becoming parents. And you could probably a little easier go back to that, versus I'm sure her world has shifted in a way where maybe she still wants to go back to work, but how do you do that in a way that's sustainable while you're also a mom, right? I think dads are never questioned. Like, they can be at work all day, and it's like no one asked, how long did you leave the kids at home for, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
just a biological difference, obviously, when you have breastfeeding moms. But also, it's just it's a societal thing where obviously the main caretakers are typically expected to be the women, and so we can never do things right. We either work too much and don't spend enough time with the kids, or we don't work enough and only spend time with the kids. And
It's
it's
so
like
much pressure.
so much, yes. And so, I mean, I'm sure you can speak for yourself about how the transition into fatherhood has impacted your work life, or your sense of responsibility. In what you do professionally. Is that something that you've thought about, considered? Have you already felt that impact in your work life since becoming a father?
Yeah, I have felt that. I have felt that impact. For years, the time that I've been doing this, where I make these videos on the internet. Basically, I'm a journalist and a creator. I've allowed for, I have an idea and I'll ruminate on it and I'll sit with it, and like
Mhm.
maybe I'll sit with it all day long before I, finally sit down and film the idea. And that process has mostly been guided by my kind of creative impulses, and you know what I mean? Like I've just kind of allowed it to flow naturally. And I guess that's part of the kind of first thing that I said, which is like the idea of like, okay, I can kind of like sit with this idea for the day and do my little casual research and read and maybe go pick up a book, and I'll spend a little time and I'll kind of write down a few words here. And then maybe, okay, at the end of the day, I'll kind of lock in, or maybe I'll take a couple of days and then I'll lock in and get this thing done. That idea is like, you don't have that much time anymore, dude. Like you don't have the space to just free flow. You have exactly 37 minutes. What are you going to do with it? Like, he's going to be asleep. Your son's going to take a 30-minute nap. Okay. What are you going to do with that 30 minutes? All right. And so that's been a big kind of shift. And I've definitely felt that in my work and in my life. Like I joke all the time. I used to work here. I worked from home. I have a home studio. It's like, I used to work here. Yeah, I used to work at this at this place. And not a little less now, actually, a little less than I used to, truthfully. And so, it's an adjustment, right? Katia, it's like it's adjustment, but at the end of the day, it's worth it, and it's something that I think. First of all, he's young and he needs us for everything. He can't sit up on his own, right? He needs us. And so I'm happy that I have somebody that needs us and that I'm available to be there for those needs. This time is so precious, and from what I hear, it's short. I don't know. That I've
So
been
short.
told that it's pretty short. And
Hmm.
so, he'll grow up, and before you know it, I'll wish that he was
Little
um
again, needing you,
little.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
How old is he now?
He's 5 months. He's 5 months
Yeah.
old.
The baby stage, just it flies by. I say that's what tricks women into having multiple children, is because we like forget all of the challenges and we just miss having a baby, and it flies by. Like, you blink, a year's gone by and they're no longer your little baby that needed you for everything.
Yeah.
um and after my first, it was so hard that I was like, I don't know if I want any more kids. Like, I don't know, that's a lot.
Yep.
And here I am 3 kids later, where I'm just
Yeah.
like, I told, after I gave birth, the day, like actually moments after I gave birth to our son, our third, I told him, if I have a burst of insanity at some point, remind me that I am telling you we're not having any more children, because I know that once, the baby stage passes, you want another, you miss the baby.
Hmm.
But no. 3, that's it. That's for me.
Three
I'm
is
done.
three is
That
enough.
was my
We're
limit.
done.
But so I know, your son is still little. There's still some years to go. But as someone who studies history and ruminates a lot about, I'm sure, like, a lot of topics. One of the things that I think makes your work so powerful is how you tie the past to the present. And is there something that you've, so far, based on your understanding of history, thought about how it's shaped how you think you're going to raise your child?
Yeah, yeah. I've been thinking about this question a lot.
Mhm.
One, we're living in this moment where history is being erased, and in some respects criminalized. I mean, I think about there are laws in several states where if you teach history a certain way, a certain truthful way, not if you lie about history, but if you teach the truth of history in a certain way, you can lose your teaching license. Your school can be penalized. There are laws on the books where you can be criminalized for doing that. And so I've been thinking a lot about like what things will I teach him and what things do I feel like it's so important for him to know. So that's been on my mind a ton. And then of course, I'm thinking about the fact that, he was born, I said this somewhere else recently, and I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm putting your business out there, bro. My mom was born in 1965, and which is the year when the Voting Rights Act was passed and signed into law. And here we are, 61 years later, and it was just gutted by the Supreme Court. And so like in the span of her lifetime so far, and, the time between when she was born and when my son was born was like this like period where multiracial democracy specifically was something to be protected and pursued in this country. And so I'm thinking a lot about history, I guess is the point. And I think what I want for my son is not only obviously to know his history and to be tapped in on all of that, but also to be the kind of person that makes a difference in the world, not in the like pressure, go be great kind of thing, but in the sense that the type of people, as you study history, are the people who are defiant, who are compassionate and courageous. All of my favorite historical figures had that quality of being both courageous and compassionate, a person who could stand for the right, but also help those who are in need. And that's what I pray for him every day. And that's the thing that I pray over him and with him about. He can't speak English yet, but I talk to him about that all the time. And those are the lessons that I've learned from history. I think about a Constance Baker Motley. I think about a Barbara Jordan, or more common figures like Martin Luther King Jr. or Stokely Carmichael and others who thought about people and what it meant to represent them and to pursue justice for them, and did so courageously. And that's the kind of person that I want him to be. And what I've realized is I've said this over and over, son, I want you to be courageous and compassionate, courageous and compassionate. What I realized is that I have to kind of model that for him. He will only be that if he sees it. And it's humbled me in some ways. It's made me much more aware of my own actions and the way I show up. And so it definitely influences even the way that I show up online in my work as a result of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And that's, I think, what a lot of us, I want to think that a lot of us, more than it seems, want that for our children, right? And that's one of the hardest things of parenting, is that the lessons we want to instill in them have to be embodied somehow in us, right? Because how else are they going to learn, and that's how I try to live life too, right? I'm trying to actively participate in making the world worthy of my children, and I will continue to say that and try to live by it as well, because it's the truth. We want compassionate, kind, courageous, empathetic children. We have to model that for them, and it gives me hope to meet, parents like you, and, most people that I have on my podcast seem to be those kinds of parents. And so it gives me hope that despite the current administration's, atrocities and everything that they're doing to retract progress, that our generation and our parenting will help raise that kind of future that, our children deserve. But it's hard. And sometimes I feel stressed and overwhelmed by where we're at as a country right now, and what that future will look like for our kids once they're out in the world, as they say. Are there ever moments when your awareness of history and of where we're at now and how we've kind of gone back in time, is there any just overwhelm, or how do you kind of bypass that emotion, if so?
Oh my goodness. All the time. all the time. I think if you're doing anything right, you're gonna feel a little overwhelmed at times, right? And I definitely feel that way about being a father and about what it means to raise a young Black boy in this country. It's certainly overwhelming at times, and the thing that you said it perfectly, that like that's part of the reason why we have our hand to the plow, because we're not just working for things to be better for ourselves. We're working for things to be better for the next generation, of which our children are a part. And so that helps, that okay, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, let me go do something about it. That certainly helps a lot. But definitely feeling that at times, and trying to kind of game plan. I tell people, I've told a friend this recently, that I'd never thought about like the safety of my home per se. Like I feel like I want a safe home, and we live in a pretty safe neighborhood and things are fine. I mean, and bad things can happen anywhere. So I feel generally kind of unfazed by that. But you have a kid, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, whoa, hold on, what's going on here? And let me call my city council person to get this road slowed down. Like these people are driving too fast, and like you start to really think through all kinds of things that weren't on your mind before. And so I'm definitely to long answer, I'm definitely experiencing that. But I do hold on to hope that, as you say, there are more of us who want a better future than those who are working to kind of take us back, those who are working to turn this turn this world into something so contentious, and to destroy it, whether it be with climate stuff, political polarization, all of that stuff that's going on. It does feel like there are more of us who want better than those who want either the same or worse. And so I'm holding on to a little bit of that hope as well.
Thank you for listening to the Unaparent podcast, produced by Studio Dama and hosted by me, Katia Lindor. If you like what you heard, subscribe or follow us on social media and tune in as we share deeply human stories about the unapparent truths of parenting.